I think we have this fear that if I'm not accessible all the time to everyone,
Yep.
then I'm not going to grow my business. And in reality, the opposite is true. When you're very clear about the hours you work, how many clients you can have, you're so much more present, you're not burnt out, and it just makes work so much more enjoyable.
Introducing the Vixen Voice, a podcast for ambitious women entrepreneurs ready to move into their feminine essence, live their truth, and unlock their full potential. I'm your host, April Roberts, and each week I'll be interviewing inspiring women who decided to take a leap of faith to pursue their dream. Women who believe that they were born for something bigger. Hey there, just popping in quickly. It's April Roberts, and I wanted to thank you for being a loyal listener of the Vixen Voice. It means so much to me. And because of that, we're going to be popping in these little announcements because I want you to be the first to know what's going on at the Vixen Gathering. So if you haven't done so yet, click the link below and check out the Vixen Founders Collective. The members who are already in are raving, and we would love to have you join us in the ultimate business consulting, networking, and personal growth community for Gen X female founders. See you. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Vixen Voice. Today, we are going to be diving in to the story of Liz Kelly, who is a therapist in the Washington, D.C. area, but she hasn't been a therapist for her entire career. So we're going to be talking about her career transitions. We're probably going to be catching up because we know each other for a long time. And this is really cool. We're also going to be talking about the transaction of money and mental health. So this is a topic we don't talk about a lot. I love talking about self-care and finances and owning your worth. So we're going to kind of combine it all today and dig in. And we're also going to talk about her amazing book. I love the title of this book. This book is cheaper than therapy. So we're going to dive in. Liz, welcome. So glad to have you today.
Thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this all week.
I know, this is so fun. So here's what's really fun is Liz is the wife of one of my best friends from law school. They live in the DC area, so I don't get to see them often. I think it's been like 10 years since we saw each other in person. But it's like so cool that this podcast brings us together so we can catch up and talk about all the amazing things that you've been doing. So I love it so much. It's really like, I've been looking forward to it too. My heart is very warm today. I'm super excited to talk to you. So Liz, since it's your first time on the Vixen Voice, my first question is, obviously you're this amazing multifaceted woman. You're a wife, you're a mom, you're a therapist, you've had multiple careers, right? You've transitioned over life, but what is like a pivotal story that sticks out to you in your life that's really helped create this amazing woman that we see sitting before us today?
I love that question. So I think one of the pivotal moments in my life was I came to Washington, D.C. after college, and I didn't really exactly know why I was coming. I mean, I was interested in international affairs, and I had these sort of grand visions of working in politics and international relations, but I didn't really know what that looked like on a day-to-day basis. So,
Yeah.
of course, I come out here after college, and I end up in working as an office manager for an office in downtown DC. And I learned a lot, but I realized after working in political fundraising and nonprofit development, it was exciting. I met interesting people, but it really was not a good fit for me. It was competitive. It was having to deal with large groups of people on a regular basis. And I realized that's just not who I am. I like figuring out how people overcome challenges. I like supporting them through those challenges. I like working on
Yeah.
one-on-one with individuals. And I was really down because I felt stuck. I was like, oh my gosh, I've spent, I think at that point it'd been like 10 years working in this career. I was like, what do I do? And I think I was lamenting to my mom, and I was like, I don't like what I'm doing. And she's like, well, you can go back to school. And I think like through tears, I was like, I can. That's an option. And so I think I was about 28 or 29, and I ended up going back to school to get my master's in social work. which enabled me to enter the mental health field and become a therapist.
I love it. I love it. And no looking back, huh? So for 13 years now, you've been doing this. So what fulfillment do you find in your current career that you didn't have before?
Well, I love getting to talk with people one on one. That is one of my favorite parts of the job. And I feel so incredibly privileged to be able to be a part of people's stories and to be able to have
Yeah.
a window into their stories and to help people discover how resilient they are and to help them connect the dots between their experiences and their insights and their patterns and to really help people identify their values so that they can create meaningful change. Because I think so often, we have all these thoughts in our head. And the really beautiful thing about therapy is there's something magical about saying these things out loud to another
Mhm.
person and then having that person be able to hold up a mirror and say, this is what I'm hearing from you. And to be able to gain insight from that and then turn that insight into action.
I love that you talk about the magic of saying things out loud. I was just talking about this in my coaching session with my Vixen Founders Collective yesterday and really encouraging them to find safe spaces to share things out loud, right? And I think it's important to say that obviously in a session with you, it's a safe space for your client, right? Because the problem is when you first start speaking things, if you're saying them to the wrong people, they can shut it down very quickly, right? But I do agree. There's something collectively, and a lot of people talk about COVID started it, but really it started before COVID. This don't say this, right? Like when political correctness came along and everything. And I think everyone got so careful watching what they were saying that it really shuts down a part of our soul. Now, I believe in being a good person, like being loving to people and being careful from that standpoint, but to constantly watch what you're saying and not be able to share, I feel has mentally, spiritually and emotionally affected us a lot. So do you see that a lot with your clients when you're chatting?
Right. I do. One thing that comes up a lot is people say, I shouldn't be concerned about what people think. And
Yeah.
I'll sometimes slow down and I'll correct them because Brene Brown actually had some really wonderful things to say about this. We're hardwired to connect to other people and to want to belong
Mhm.
and to want to be loved and to have a community and want to be a part of
Yes.
that. And so we do care what people think. But what I loved what Brene Brown said was she said, we shouldn't care what everyone thinks. We should care about
Mhm.
what some people think. And that's what you're saying, those safe spaces. We should care about
Yeah.
the people that have our back, the people that want the best for us, the people that support us and cheer us on. We should care about what they think, but we shouldn't care about what everybody thinks.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, it comes from Brene Brown. What I was saying, her exact quote I love is "Not everyone deserves to know your story." So I love.
Yes. Absolutely. That's so true. And especially in the era of social media, there can be such power in telling your
Yeah.
story. But especially if there's sensitive parts to your story, if your story hasn't always been easy, if your story involves an overwhelming life experience, so we need to be really thoughtful about how and when and to whom we share that story.
Yeah, no, I agree. That leads me, I know you said when we were chatting beforehand, I always ask, I don't think I've ever said this on air, but I always ask my guests, is there anything you're not comfortable talking about on air, right? Because I want to keep it an easygoing flow and we don't really love to edit. We want to keep it real. And you were like, no, I'm pretty much an open book like I was in my book. So I know you shared your story and you wrote your book to help people, but how was that opening up and putting yourself out there like that? Because I love that you're talking about your transition because tons of our listeners are either in transition or have transitioned. So we'll go back to that. But a ton of people listening are wondering, should I write a book? How do I show up on social media? Right. So, what was your experience when you kind of like opened up through your book? How was that for you?
Right. So I did think a lot about what I shared in my book, and
Hmm.
everything I shared in my book I would be comfortable if a client knew this information about me. If a
Yep.
family member knew this information about me, I would feel comfortable putting that out there. And so, but I did have to think about that, about, what do I want to share? And is writing a book is really vulnerable. You know, you're putting your creativity and your
Yeah.
knowledge and your perspective, you're putting that out there in the world to be judged. And some people are going to like it and some people aren't going to like it. So
Mhm.
and it takes a lot of time and energy and effort and it's a long process. So writing a book can feel really vulnerable. And I had to sit with that discomfort and be okay with that and recognize that I'm going to be putting myself out there
Mhm.
and it's not going to click with everyone. You know, just like I'm not the
Mhm.
right therapist for everyone, my book's not going to be the right book for everyone either. But it is going to be the right book for some, and that's what kept me going.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective. And in business in general, it's true, right? If you're serving everyone, it's almost like you're serving no one because are you really getting to the heart of who your client is? Are you really getting to the depth of what bothers them, how you can help them, etc.? It's kind of like when you think about a generalist and a specialist, right? Like a specialist just is more focused, gets paid more, but not just that, but it's because, they're bringing special knowledge and they can focus on a certain area and go deep in that area, right? So,
Right. That was actually some of the best advice I got when I was thinking about writing a book. There was a person in the publishing industry, and they said, if you're writing your book for everyone, you're writing for no one. And that was one
yes.
of the things he suggested was really visualize who is your ideal reader and really think about who this person is, what do they do, how do they spend their time, what are their
Yeah.
pain points? And once you have that vision of your ideal reader, then you can begin to write your book and craft your story. And I think that goes for business as well. You want to
Mhm.
really visualize who's your ideal client.
No, I love that. And I love that you got that advice and how much thought you put into your book because, I think a lot of times people are like, "Oh, I want to write a book. Oh, I want a podcast." And, I think everyone's kind of used to social media now, so that's like a comfort, but when you go into these other arenas, like there are things you don't think about. I mean, I think I talked about this on my 100th episode. I was like, so, as I shared with you before we went in the financial world, we were highly regulated. So, although I had a TV show and I did live TV, I still had to be careful what I said, right? So, there was constantly this, oh, I'd love to share this, but, I can't because you have to be careful, like, because, how much financial advice you're giving because I was a fiduciary. And anyway, we won't go into the nuggets of that, but as you know, different level standard of care for us. And so when I had my podcast, I'm like, cool, I'm going to talk about whatever I want. And I don't mind, but I didn't think about who would be listening, right? I'll be honest. And so a funny story is I'm sitting at the table with my parents and they're like, "Oh, we want to look into your first episode." And like they play a short from YouTube and it's me talking about a pregnancy scare I had that I never told them about because we were talking about, having kids in your 40s and 50s. So it was relevant. And I was just like, oh my gosh, welcome to the reality of podcasting. Like, I can't believe my dad
Right.
just played this at the breakfast table, right? And I mean, it's fine. My parents and I are close, but had I put more thought into it, I probably would have warned them and given them a heads up of things that are coming. But it's so funny. It's these things you don't think about, like, oh my gosh, yes, my parents are going to listen to this. Or, if you're, unfortunately, I don't have any grandparents still alive, but, or my grandparents, or this person, or this
Right.
person. And like, for me, I'm like, okay, I put it out there. I'm owning it. I don't care. Like, because it has a purpose. It's to help people, right? That's why I'm
Right.
sharing. So I don't care. But it is a funny thing. I love that you were so thoughtful before you went into it because I'm not sure everyone puts that thought into things because they're so nervous just to do the thing that maybe they're not so intentional, is the word I like to talk about, right? Like, what's your
Right.
intention?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that helped me, and I think I would advise anyone, especially if you're
Yeah.
thinking of writing a nonfiction book, is to do a book proposal. And that was a huge part of writing the
Mhm.
book because they really thinking through essentially it was a business plan for my book and writing
Love it.
the outline. And that really helped shape my perspective and shape my intention for the book.
It's so funny. I'll share. So I have an outline for a book that I can't find time to do because I decided I need to write it and I'm not hiring a ghostwriter. but
Right.
I was struggling with the table of contents because I mean, I've written a book before for finance, so I know that's where you start. And then suddenly one morning after prayer, like within 10 minutes, I had the table of contents outlined. Like it just became so clear to me. Like it was so crazy.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, for me, a lot of times in that instance, I was basically asking God what he wanted me to talk about because I'm very faith driven and it came. So I was like, awesome.
Nice. Yeah.
No, I love this talk about prepping for the book because again, I have so many clients who are like, should I write a book? So I'd love to hear more. So you did your book proposal, you put it out there, and you actually chose to work with a publishing house, right? Versus self-publishing.
Yes, I did find a publisher.
Yeah. And how was that? And like, why did you decide to go with the publisher versus self-publishing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits both directions.
Yeah.
Self-publishing, you get a lot of control, the depending on what your financial goals are, you're keeping what you make from the book. For me though, I wanted to work with a team and I wanted to work with an
Hmm.
editor and I wasn't sure, being a mom and being a therapist, I didn't want to go find a graphic designer to design the cover and I didn't want to go out and
Yeah.
find an editor and they had all of those people right there. And so they were I was so lucky to have an incredible publisher that offered a ton of support and they were really amazing when it came to, the editing process and the marketing and all of those things. And so for me, going the more traditional route gave me a foundation of support that I don't think I would have had otherwise. But if you're someone who's resourceful and creative, self-publishing has worked well for so many people.
Yeah, I love it. And there are things you should know about self-publishing, so if you're doing it, like do your research and understand what you're getting into.
Yeah, and actually, I do want to add that, for those individuals writing a book, you do have to be very careful with your money as you're writing a book because once people find out that you're writing a book, book marketers and freelance editor, or all, and I'm not trying to demonize anybody in the industry. There's good eggs and bad eggs, but it can be very easy to spend a lot of money as an author in terms of marketing or graphic design, or there's all these services that are out there to support authors and some of them are worthwhile and a lot of them are not worthwhile because running a book sometimes pays off financially but sometimes doesn't and writing a book
Mhm.
might be for other reasons like it's to promote your business and to put your message out there and make new connections and do things like be on podcasts. There's a lot of amazing reasons to write a book, but if your main motivation is for financial gain, you might want to look at other options.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that. So, 13 years ago, when you went into this new career, did you envision yourself writing a book and being on podcast, or what was your vision at that point?
Ooh, so I always had envisioned writing a book. That was
I
something
love it.
I've wanted to do for my
Mhm.
entire adult life. I've always wanted to write a book. I just didn't know what kind of a book. I didn't know if I wanted to do fiction or
Mhm.
nonfiction. I just didn't have a clue. But I knew I wanted to write one. So 13 years ago, I mean, I always had that book brewing inside, but it wasn't until COVID when I was like, gosh, so many people are looking for mental health services, but they don't
Mhm.
have the access, they don't have the resources, they don't have insurance coverage. I was like, wait, I could provide a solution to this problem, or maybe not a solution, but a resource for people who are struggling
Mhm.
with limited access to therapy or to mental health services. And that's when I was like, okay, that's what I want to write a book about. So 13 years ago, yeah, I don't think I could have really envisioned myself being here. I saw myself working in the mental health industry and I think I saw myself as a writer in some capacity, but it was hard to get a clear picture of what it is right now. But I wouldn't change anything, and I'm really happy for how things have developed.
I love it. And you're in private practice now. Have you always been in private practice since you went into therapy?
I've actually worked in a lot of different settings. I've worked at a
Okay.
hospital. I've worked for community mental health agencies. I've worked for bereavement counseling centers, and I've actually
Wow.
worked for the DC Bar Lawyers Assistance Program, providing counseling and therapy to individuals in the legal profession too.
which is much needed, by the way.
Yeah, and so this is just a PSA. If
Yeah.
you're a member of a certain bar, check and see. They might have
Yeah.
mental health services available that you can access for free or for low cost.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mean to laugh about that, but it really is. I mean, you're working around
Right.
the clock, you're kind of in this like tunnel vision world. I remember when I practiced law, especially depending on the type of law you practice, like you can get very closed in and burnout is
Right.
so high. So I think that's a great service.
Absolutely. So I definitely encourage people to check out to see what's available to them.
I love that. So when did you go private practice? When did you pivot into that world?
So I pivoted into that world after my kids were born. So I ended
Mhm.
up doing some work with some of the online therapy providers, and that was, fun for a while, but financially it really didn't pay very well. And
Mhm.
so really it's been a gradual shift since my kids were born, because what I found is that it enables me to be an entrepreneur. I'm essentially working for myself. I can create my own hours. And when you have kids, that is a such a luxury and a privilege that is not
Mhm.
lost on me. And I'm grateful for that every day, to be able to have that ability to be flexible with my career.
I love that because, I was in the financial industry for 15 years and I was always independent. I worked with my dad for a year and a half and then I had my own practice and it drives me kind of crazy because 12 years ago women made up 30% of the financial industry and today they make up 30%. And I know it's because when they get to the stage of life, if they're in the traditional financial planning setting, or financial world, it's very hard to juggle being a mom, being a wife, having that career and returning the numbers that are asked of you. And to me, it's insane because I felt like you said, when I was a financial advisor, I had control of my hours just like I do now. Like, in fact, I remember at first we would see people at night or we would have evening appointments like 2 nights a week because, people would be like, oh, I can't miss work. And then I looked at our numbers and I was like, you know what? None of these people become clients. We're not going to see anyone past like 4:30 anymore. And like it didn't hurt my business at all. Actually, business increased because we weren't burnt out and we were more present, my advisors and I, right? And yeah, and I just remember, I would only see clients Tuesday and Wednesday, and like that wasn't a big deal. And my advisors would see them Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, which gave us Monday and Friday to do other work. And so I just emphasize this because if you're listening and you're in an appointment based industry, be it in mental health, even being an attorney, being a financial advisor, CPA, and you don't have control of your time, think about if private practice makes sense for you or moving to a place that supports a flexible schedule, right? Because I don't know, this is a pet peeve of mine. It drives me nuts because I'm like, this is a great, I see financial planning as a great way for women to make good money and control their schedule and still get to work. So I love that you brought that topic up.
Right. And I agree. I worked with a coach a couple of years ago, and that was one of the
Mhm.
first things she did was to think about, okay, what are the hours that you have available and how many
Yeah.
clients can you realistically see? And I was also doing evening appointments because I thought I like had to offer them.
Yeah.
And I realized that I didn't have to. If I run into a client and they say I can only meet in the evenings, I say, thank you so much for reaching out, but I'm not the right person for you, but I can recommend other options or other therapists that do offer evening appointments, and that might be
Mhm.
someone you can work with. And it hasn't impacted my business. It hasn't. I think we have this fear that if I'm not accessible all the time to everyone,
Yep.
then I'm not going to grow my business. And in reality, the opposite is true. When you're very clear about the hours you work, how many clients you can have, you're so much more present, you're not burnt out, and it just makes work so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, I agree. And what your coach was getting to with you is what's your real capacity, right? And so there's capacity from hours of the day, and there's also an energy capacity because we're all different, right? And so if your job is very emotionally demanding, like I'm sure when you're one on one with clients, just like for me with coaching versus like admin work or whatever, like it's different energy being taken from you. And so I think it's so important to really be honest about what your capacity is, define that, and it doesn't limit financial growth because then you can either charge more for that capacity or you could leverage your time better by bringing team members in to do the admin work so that you're always just face to face with clients, like whatever it is. And so, no, this is something I'm very passionate about. In fact, every month I do a complimentary webinar on this subject to help women find more hours in the week. And the question is, do you want to take these hours and like funnel them into your business? Do you want more time with your family? Do you want more time for yourself? Like what, do you want to go on a date with your significant other? Like what do you want to do? But I
Right.
love that you went through that experience
Yeah.
because I think it's so important.
But I think it really speaks to healthy boundaries or having healthy
Yeah.
professional boundaries. And that's something I know is getting thrown around a lot, this term healthy boundaries, and people aren't always exactly sure what it is. I mean, I define it
Yes.
as boundaries or whatever you need to do to protect your emotional, mental, physical, and financial peace. So
Hmm.
these are the limits that we set. And it can look like, I'm going to only see clients during these hours, or I'm going to not
Yeah.
check email after this certain point in time. And they're really critical for preventing burnout and for, helping us live life without feeling resentful or angry or exhausted or irritable all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And when I'm always talking about this, I talk about time, energy, and confidence management because everyone always wants to think about to-do list and if there are enough hours in the day to get something done. But at the end of the day, energy is not just your physical energy, it's also your emotional energy, your mental energy, spiritual energy. Like, how much do you really have to give to other people? And again, we all differ in that depending on our makeup, right? So that's why I like to joke. I kind of don't like the books like the 5 a.m. Club. I like the concept that you should plan something, but not everyone functions best having a 5 a.m. routine, right? Like we're all
Right.
different.
Exactly. Some people might be the, 11 p.m. club. And if that works for them and they're getting enough sleep, then that's great. You have to figure out what works for you for sure.
Yeah, I love it. So I love your definition of boundaries. I extend it to because I also coach on like boundaries. And the first part is defining what you're protecting. Because to me, a boundary is you're just protecting something, right? So, like you talked
Right.
about your health, your energy, your mental state. And then I'm like, you might be protecting your personal core values or your company core values. You might be protecting your goals that you have. You might be protecting your family or someone else you love or your team members. And I mean, that's kind of when you're fighting the fight for other people. So I love that you're defining boundaries as kind of the self care avenue. But I think it's so important to really think, okay, what am I protecting? And when you turn it to that mentality, it's so much easier to set the boundary because for some reason, setting
Right.
boundaries is so hard for us women.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're given all these messages that we should be accessible to everyone and we should be
Yeah.
accommodating and we should be nice and we should be givers and give and give and give. And but at the same time, like there's a limit to that. Like we can't, we are not, yeah, and cups that just can like pour endlessly. Like we have to put
Yeah.
limits on our time and energy and resources.
Well, and the crazy thing to me is feminine energy, which we have both masculine and feminine energy, and we should keep it balanced, right? Or yin and yang, whatever you want to call it. But technically, feminine energy, which we've been taught in the Western culture as women to like ignore, is receiving and resting and pausing. It's also creativity, communication, nurturing all this stuff. But like, it's crazy to me that it's been basically flipped on its head where we're supposed to give, give, give when the feminine nature is to receive, right? And so we're bad at receiving. What would you say to that?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense that to be able to slow down and recognize that rest is essential and
Mhm.
giving to ourselves is essential and absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, there's sayings that like pay. homage to this, but, kind of flippantly, like if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, but I mean, it's really true, right? Like,
Right.
you
Yeah.
are the foundation of your home, you're the foundation of your business, you're probably a foundation of your community, and so I
Right.
just love to take the opportunity to really encourage women, like, rest and make sure your cup is full, because how
Right.
can you like you said, you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Right, exactly. And one of the things I do with individuals in therapy is to really talk about what things are actually restorative, because I think what happens in
Yes.
our current society is that we think we're resting or we think we're relaxing, but the activity we're doing is not actually restoring us in any way. And so,
Yeah.
for example, like sometimes, I do it too, everybody does, in between sessions, or, if I'm exhausted at the end of the day, I will scroll on my phone for a while.
Yeah.
But that doesn't actually do anything to restore me. But if I, go and fill up my bird feeder, or if I go, pull a couple weeds in the garden, or if I stretch, or if I take a quick nap, like that actually does restore me. Or if I talk on
Yeah.
the phone with a friend, that is restorative. But so I think we have to be really careful that when we do choose to rest, that we're really paying attention to what's going to actually help us regain our energy, or kind of push that reset button so that we can, feel better and move forward.
Yeah, I love that, and that goes back to capacity, what I was talking about, how it's different for each of us, and so to be truly successful and show up as your best, I believe you have to become a student of yourself. Like, I try to when my clients first start with me, first thing we're working on is time, energy, and confidence management, so they have the time to do the work, right, or build their business or whatever, and it's like, okay, for the next week, I want you to write down everything that gives you energy and everything that sucks your energy, like two lists, right? And it's the first time they start paying attention. We were just talking about this in my collective yesterday because someone was sharing. I was sharing how I don't know why right now I'm just drained at the end of the day. Like I'm very physical, like I'm kind of baked and done and ready. But I started cooking every night and I'm like, I don't want to wake up to a dirty kitchen. So I'll just put on music and I'm like, okay, I have to clean the kitchen because I'm not coming down to a dirty kitchen in the morning. And so we got into this talk about housework and what I don't know. I was taught this. I always had male mentors, and I feel like they compartmentalize a little bit better than we women do. We're getting better at it. And so I've always asked male and female mentors, like, how do you show up your best? Like, how do you balance? Because balance is a fiction, right? Like, you can't balance. I mean,
Right.
and so, like, some of the best advice I got was, like one guy was sharing with me, hey, look, I don't cut my yard because, that's not restorative to me, like what you're talking about. Like, I don't cut my own grass. I hire someone to do that. Totally worth me writing the check because I can spend that time doing something else, either restoring myself or building my business. He said, but my top advisor has acres and he loves cutting the grass and like that's his relaxation. And so it's crazy, that I was taught this by a very high performing man at a early age, right? Like basically, if it's something
Right.
you enjoy, like I know my dad loves going to the grocery store, so my mom never goes to the grocery store because she hates it. And so it's like,
Right.
I don't know why when you're a high performing woman, you think you have to do it all. Like, let's pay attention to
Right.
what we enjoy, what's worth it, what moves the needle the most, and like, let's delegate or write a check for the rest. Or think, does it even need to be
Absolutely.
done? Right?
Right. Right. Or give permission to just let it go. And yeah, I know one
Yeah.
one way to zero in on that is I find myself asking clients a lot, what would make things 5% less stressful? Because sometimes we kind of fall
Love
into the
it.
all or nothing thinking, where it's like, I have to
Hmm.
overhaul everything. I got to change everything. But like, we have to start small. And that was actually something my coach even asked, was like, what is like one
Yeah.
small thing that would make your life a little less stressful? And I realized I was like, I need help folding laundry. And so I started
Yeah.
hiring that out because I was like, this is taking hours of my week. And I would rather use this time to build my
Yeah.
business. And so it's just, little things. And I recognize that that is a financial luxury that, some people may not have at this moment. But
Hmm.
but but tuning in and just asking, like what
Yeah.
would make things 2% less stressful? What would make things 5% less stressful? And
Yeah.
maybe it's going to bed a little bit earlier. Maybe it's, leaving your phone outside the bedroom at night so that you're not doom scrolling, or, just finding those little tweaks that have big payoffs.
I love that, and when you realize what needs to shift, maybe you can't shift it immediately, like you said, but have a goal to shift it and be creative. Because, I mean,
Right.
here's the deal, there's other members of your family, so maybe people can help fold the laundry and it
Right.
becomes a fun family activity.
For
Or, I
sure.
had a client who got her girls to help clean out the pantry and they freaking loved it. And like they had fun and it was good quality family time, right? Like, she couldn't
Right.
afford to hire that out. So, if you can't hire it out, think like, can I delegate? Because you don't have to delegate to team members. You can delegate to your family, right? Or
Right.
people offering to help you. And then, does it need to be done? Because I was joking yesterday. I was like, look,
Yeah.
it's a non negotiable for me that the kitchen gets clean because I like to come down, have my coffee, have the nice clean kitchen in the morning, but like the laundry, I'll totally put in the closet and fold it on the weekend where I don't see it, right? Like that doesn't
Right.
have to get done for my mental sanity immediately. Like
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
don't like looking at it, so my creative solution is to put it in the closet till I find another one. But yeah, be aware of these things and how they affect you.
Right. Yeah, my laundry is folded, but there's a decent chance it may not get put away. We just might fish things out of the basket, and that's all
Sure.
right. We can take some shortcuts when needed.
Oh my gosh. I had a friend coming, so I moved my laundry that needed folded into my closet. And then Monday I moved it back out. And I'm like, okay, when am I gonna fold this? So I've been so busy lately. I'm like, because at the end of the day, it's usually just me around here. It doesn't affect anyone
Right.
else, right? And it's crazy because I love things organized and put away. And I'm just like, you know what? Right now at this period of my life, I'm just gonna have to deal with the fact that the laundry's not folded and put up. And
Right.
maybe
Exactly.
next quarter it can be a priority, or I can ask my housekeepers if they can help or whatever.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of, I saw this, I think it was a meme, and it was like a person juggling, and each of the balls was
Yeah.
labeled work, family, health, all these things. And it was talking about how I think we have to be okay because when we drop a ball, because that's just the
Yes.
way it is. Not everything can be top priority. And
Mhm.
I've become more comfortable realizing that, I'm not going to be on top of everything every
Mhm.
week. There's going to be something that I've dropped, or I'm behind, and that's okay, because as
Yeah.
long as I know that I'm going to pick it back up again, and I'm going to, eventually so it's sort of like, I feel like some weeks I'm doing great with, moving my body and eating well and cooking. Other weeks I'm really great with staying on top with my business needs, and other weeks my house looks amazing. Other weeks my house looks like a disaster. It looks like, there's like a crime scene, but just, being offering ourselves more compassion, that it's okay if we don't have it all together all the time.
Yeah, no, I agree. We have to let go of this notion of perfection. And this conversation reminds me of something you mentioned to me that, people sometimes get confused between self esteem and self compassion. So, Liz, can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So self-esteem is often rooted in the external. It's how we measure up against other people. It's, what we've achieved. Do we get that promotion? How much money are we making? What does our house look like? Are our kids succeeding? Do we run that 5K? It's very much rooted in the external. But the problem with self-esteem is that it's going to go up and down based on what's going on in your life.
Yep.
And so there's a researcher, Dr. Kristen Knapp. She's done a ton of research on self compassion. And I love what she has to say about self compassion. And she makes the point that having self compassion is much more important than having self esteem. And self compassion is really treating yourself like a friend, because we are so much harder on ourselves than we are
Mhm.
to other people. We'll say things to ourselves, our inner critics will say really awful things that we would never dream about saying to another person. So, developing self compassion is really about treating yourself just like you would treat a really cherished friend. And the
Yeah.
wonderful thing about self compassion is that it can be there for you at the highest of highs. If your friends, closed a great business deal or wrote a book, you would be cheering them on and you would be celebrating
Right.
them. But if your friend was having a hard time, you wouldn't be putting them down. You wouldn't be making them feel worse. You would be lifting them up. You would be gentle with them. You would be offering them that
Yeah.
love and that grace. And so what I love about self-compassion is that it can be there for you at all points of your life.
Mhm. No, I love that, and I love the cherished friend. I often tell my clients, like, "Would you talk to your daughter this way?" Like, if you had a daughter, right? Because this came up again in our
Right.
coaching session yesterday. We were doing productivity mastery, and I had them all rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10, like, in the last 2 months, how has your productivity been? Like, that was the beginning. And the first woman to speak was like, "It's been a 6, it's crap." And that was her, and I was like, or I've been crap, something like that. And I was like, "Okay, as I talk to everyone else, I need you to reflect on what you just said. And would you tell your daughters, like, if they came home with a C on a paper, would you tell them this, like, how would you speak to them?" And she was like, I was like, "Would you tell them, oh, this is crap?" And she was like, "Never." And she didn't even
Right.
realize she had said this, right? So it's like catching like how we speak to ourselves, because as you said, we can be our greatest critic. And I love the idea of self-compassion, like cheering yourself on, because I'm a big fan of like celebrating wins, even on a daily
Right.
basis. Like you have
Me
wins every
too.
day, right? I love that.
Yeah. I'm not much of a journaler. I'm not someone who writes in a journal every
Same.
day. It just doesn't do much for me. But one thing I do every day is I do have a journal, and I'll write down my wins, and I'll write down what I'm appreciate and what I and gratitude. And I
Mhm.
also write down I am statements like I am resilient, I am confident. And
Love it.
so for me it takes like 5 minutes. It doesn't take very long, but recognizing those wins is really helpful because on the days where I feel like I haven't done anything, I am not productive, I'll write down some wins and I'm like, wait a minute. No, I got my kids off to school. I cleaned the kitchen. I actually did a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, I love it. And what I like to emphasize too is sometimes wins are not from our doing. Sometimes something really good just happens to us, or someone gives us something, or something shows up. And I like to
Yeah.
encourage women to celebrate that too, because it opens you up to receiving, right? Like it invites,
Right.
when you were talking earlier about, oh, I have to see people whenever, like that's a scarcity mentality. And what we want is an
Right.
abundance mentality. Like I'm going to do what needs to be done. And then I'm going to trust that what's coming to me is what I should receive. Right. And so
Absolutely.
we don't want to block that energy. I love that. So this kind of leads us towards self-care, and I love that you like to talk about financial self-care and the importance, kind of the intersection of money and mental health, or finances and mental health. So share with us a little bit your view on that, Liz.
Sure. So I think self-care gets misconstrued sometimes as treating yourself. And
Mhm.
I disagree with that. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love a good little treat. If I use
Yeah.
those to motivate myself, I'll be like, I'm
Yep.
gonna go out for coffee after this if I can get this done. I'm a huge fan of treats, but self-care is not the same as treating yourself. Because if
Mhm.
if doing something is going to make your life more stressful in the long run, it's not really
Yes.
self-care. So for example, if I'm having a horrible day and I buy myself a pair of shoes, yeah, I might feel good for 5 minutes. But if my value and my goal is to be financially stable and to pay out credit card debt, I'm not really taking an action that's in line with my values. And so that to me is not real self-care. And so paying attention to our finances, learning more about money and managing money and saving and educating ourselves, I think is such an incredible form of self-care because money can cause so much stress. And so if we are willing to face that anxiety that we have about money, and it's going to be uncomfortable, really
Mhm.
digging in there, getting to know what your expenses are, figuring out how much it's going to cost to start a business, or how much money you should be paying on rent, all of those details, really getting intimate with your money is can be incredibly anxiety provoking. But
Yeah.
if you have the courage to do it, your anxiety might go up initially, but in the long run, you're going to feel so much less stressed.
Yeah.
And so if we
No,
can
I
avoid the avoidance, that's really going to go a long way in terms of financial self-care.
I love that, and it's a very healthy version. And I also feel like it's crazy because women will put pressure on themselves to self-care, like, "Oh, I need to find a day to go to the spa." you probably don't need a whole freaking day in the spa to restore,
Right.
right? Like maybe
Right.
you need a 29-minute nap. Maybe you need to take mini breaks during the day.
Yeah.
Like maybe, like you said, taking care of yourself in some different way. It's so funny. You talked about scrolling the screen earlier to like rest. And so I'm a certified high performance coach. And basically, research has shown that high performers take a break on average every 52 minutes, right? So think of
Okay.
the world we live
Yeah.
in where you're hopping from Zoom to Zoom, and in between, you're on this device or this device. And one, you're taking no breaks. And two, the research also showed that people weren't actually working more, but we're getting overwhelmed. We're getting over visually stimulated because of all
Okay.
the screens. And so,
Right.
like, when you set your alarm to take a break every 50 minutes, it might be that you just sit back in your chair, relax, and close your eyes. And, like, for 2 minutes, you're just, there. I just taught like a 2-minute meditation to my group the other week, and they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how much better I feel in
Right.
2 minutes,
In
right?
just 2 minutes, it's incredible. Yeah, one of
Yeah.
my favorite things to do is to, put on a song or, something kind of sometimes I'll put, like, something kind of, like, drummy or rhythmic, but it could be any song, and I'll,
Yeah.
like, dance for the length of the song, or I'll just let my body move the way it wants to move, and I'm sure I look totally bananas, but it's I feel so much different after that
Yeah.
song, and it's such a great way to, like, release that tension that gets built up during the day.
No, it's so funny. Yesterday, I went upstairs to fix my lunch because I'm very focused on like weight loss and eating healthy now, and I have a weight loss expert helping me, and she basically was like, April, you are not going to succeed if you don't block out 30 minutes for breakfast and 30 minutes for lunch, and preferably at the same time every day. Because I usually wrap up work like 4-ish, so dinner's not that stressful, right? But like, I'm
Right.
sure for most of us, like breakfast and lunch, especially if you have kids, you're worried about taking care of everyone else for breakfast, so you don't take that time. So I did it because I'm like, okay, I'm dedicated to this. Other things have not worked. I have to fix my relationship with food. Like, there's a lot going on here. And now I look forward to that 30 minutes every day. And to your point yesterday, so I kept my headphones in because there's construction next door and I had music playing, so I didn't hear the jackhammer. And I'm fixing lunch and I feel myself dancing around the kitchen. And I'm like, I can't remember the last time I did this. This is awesome. Like these changes I've made are working because I know if
Yeah.
I'm dancing like that, like I'm a little bit footloose and fancy free in that moment, right? Like, so I loved
Right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and physical movement is such a great way. There's an amazing book called it's by Emily Nagoski, and oh gosh, my memory's failing me, but I'll send it to you so you can link it. But it's on
Okay.
burnout,
Sounds good.
and but one of the things she talks about, Emily Nagoski and her sister Amelia Nagoski, is completing the stress cycle. And physical activity is so important to complete the stress cycle because all
Yes.
during the day we're building up this tension. We'll have a difficult phone call or we'll have back-to-back meetings, and all of the stress is kind of building up in our bodies, but we don't get a chance to release that tension that's building up. And so giving yourself the chance to move, whether it's stretching or yoga or walking around the block or any kind of dancing, any kind of movement, yard work, this is really going to help you complete the stress cycle so that your nervous system can be more regulated.
I love that because I love my evening strolls around the neighborhood and I just feel everything just come out, right? And it's so
Yeah.
funny because yesterday I had a migraine. I don't know why. I think because of my change in diet, I have to adjust something. And so I did not go for my walk and I woke up in the middle of the night wide awake and I'm like, because I didn't go for my walk. So I second you in the physical. And another thing that people don't pay attention to is your energy field. It stays stuck in your energy field too. So sometimes movement can get it out, but you can actually have self-care and hygiene for your energy field too, which is what I practice when I woke up at 2 a.m. I was like, no, no, this has to get out. Like I need to go
Right.
back to sleep.
I love that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean,
Oh
don't
my
love that you were
gosh.
up in the middle of the night, but love that you knew what to do and how to handle it.
Yeah, I have a plan in place. I worked with my energy coach. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we are at time. What a fun
Oh,
conversation. I love this.
I know. All day. I'm gonna have to like make plans to visit, or you've got to come to DC so we can
Yes.
chat more.
I will, but y'all should come to Nashville. I'm in Nashville now, so it's super fun down here and lots
Oh,
of
that's
family activities
awesome.
too. So you can bring the girls. We'll have fun. I love it. So
Yeah.
before we wrap up, Liz, by the way, if you want to follow Liz, check out her book, get more tips, everything's in the show notes. If you have not subscribed, go to vixengathering.com/podcast and hit the subscribe button, share your name and email. And every Tuesday and Thursday, these amazing resources will be delivered to your inbox so you don't have to go search down our awesome guest, right? But they're also in the show notes. So anything you listen to, you can check out in the show notes and get in touch with them. And Liz has been very generous. And so if you've enjoyed this episode or you love anything we talked about from your heart, share it with us. You can send an email to team@vixengathering. You can comment on YouTube or give us a review on Spotify and Apple. And if you just take a screenshot and email that to us at team@vixengathering.com with your name and address, we will send you a complimentary copy of Liz's book. So thank you so much, Liz. Love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure you have a few books that you can give away.
Perfect. Love it so much. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you, because all our new guests get asked these questions. So, my first question is, we talked about feminine energy earlier, and I feel, it's important that we become students of ourselves. So, when do you feel the most feminine? Like, when do you feel that energy flowing through you?
Oh, I don't really think so much about, masculine versus feminine energy. I think more about when I almost think of it as like when am I vibrating at a higher frequency, and it's
Yeah.
almost like this feeling inside where you get a little tingly and like you're on the right track and like you're like, I think I'm moving in the right direction. And for me, when I was writing my book proposal, or, I've had times where I'm like, I've just felt that sense of like, okay, I'm vibrating a little higher. I'm feeling kind of that like tingly feeling inside. This is telling me that I'm on the right track.
Oh, I love that so much. And what color would that energy be for you?
I think it's kind of like a pinkish gold, kind of a sparkly feeling.
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you
Yeah.
for
Oh, that's such a fun question.
Yeah, I love asking. I've gotten answers from black to fuchsia pink to Kelly green to brown. So I just love to highlight how we women, like, we have so much in similar, but we're also so different in the way we express ourselves. And there's beauty in all of these expressions. So
For
it's
sure.
important to remember that. First of all, in ourselves, like you said, through self compassion and self love, but also seeing the beauty in everyone around us. So I love that. Awesome. Well, as we wrap up today, Liz, again, thank you so much for this fun chat. Is there any other message or tips you'd like to share with our audience? Maybe anything we didn't cover that you think is relevant?
I think we covered so much, and I so appreciate our conversation. I would just emphasize that, if you are noticing yourself being hard or being critical of yourself, to,
Yeah.
try treating yourself like a friend, and to try, rather than asking like, hey, what's wrong with you? Or why can't you get it together? Maybe start asking, what do you need right now? What would be helpful? And to just start treating yourself with more grace and compassion.
I love that reframing. It's beautiful. And as we sign off, I just want to remind everyone, I always say the world needs a little more love. So, how can you show up more loving towards yourself this week? Really focus on that if you've listened. And what's magical is when you start loving yourself more, you start loving everyone else more. So, thank you again, Liz, for being here with us. And for everyone listening, I will talk to you soon. Have a fantastic week. And don't forget, if you want to get a copy of Liz's book, just drop us a heartfelt review or feedback and send a shot to us, and the team will get you that book. So have a great day, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Liz.
Thanks so much.
Thanks again for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you want access to today's show notes, including links to all the resources we mentioned, visit vixengathering.com/podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Vixen Voice.